Bitcoin will realize its lofty goals if and only if it becomes a better way for the global monetary system to facilitate transactions. If it doesn't, then it might just prove to be another bubble like the tulip vendors are saying it will. If Bitcoin's truly valuable and not just a bubble, then it's going to create a friction-free environment for us to transfer value from point A to point B. So what then is the value add of Bitcoin? Glad you asked. Let me explain.
Bitcoin's biggest value add is that it democratizes trust. So you might be sitting there asking yourself, how does technology democratize trust? Good question, let me explain. Bitcoin is the first practical solution to the long-standing problem in computer science known as the Byzantine generals problem. To quote from the original paper defining the Byzantine general problem, imagine a group of generals of the Byzantine army camped with their troops around an enemy city. Communicating only by messenger, the generals must agree upon a common battle plan. However, one or more of them might be traitors who will try to confuse the others, and the problem is to find a method to ensure that the loyal generals will reach agreement and that their word of the messengers is accurate. More generally, the Byzantine general problem poses the question of how to establish trust between otherwise unrelated parties over an untrusted network, like the internet. The practical consequences of solving this problem is that Bitcoin gives us, for the very first time, a way for one internet user to transfer a unique piece of digital property to another internet user, such that the transfer is guaranteed to be safe and secure, and that everyone knows that the transfer has taken place, and nobody can challenge the legitimacy of the transfer. The consequences of this breakthrough are hard to overstate. I mean, what kind of digital property might be transferred in this way? Think about digital signatures, digital contracts, digital keys to physical locks or online lockers, digital ownership of physical assets such as cars and house titles, digital ownership of digital assets like certifications, photos, files, digital stocks and bonds, and digital money. With the Byzantine generals' problem solved, as dictated by the Bitcoin white paper, all of these things can be exchanged through distributed networks of trust that don't require or rely on a central intermediary like a bank or a broker. And all can be done in a way where only the owner of the asset can send it, only the intended recipient can receive it, and the asset can only exist in one place at one time. And everybody who's participating in the network takes part in validating the transaction and ownership of all assets anytime that they want. So, why is Bitcoin valuable? Well, Bitcoin is a classic network effect, a positive feedback loop. The more people who use Bitcoin, the more valuable Bitcoin is for everyone who uses it, and the higher the incentive for the next user to start using the technology. This isn't unique to us who are familiar with technology. Bitcoin shares this network effect property with the telephone, the web, and services like eBay, Spotify, Facebook, and all other major applications that we rely on. They're only valuable if the masses are participating. The major difference, though, is that Bitcoin is a four-sided network effect, where all four sides participate in maintaining and expanding the value of the network as a consequence of their own self-interested participation. The four sides of this network are consumers who pay with Bitcoin, merchants who accept Bitcoin, miners who run the computers that process and validate all the transactions and enable the distributed trust network to exist, and fourth, but not least, the developers and entrepreneurs who are building new products and services with and on top of Bitcoin. All four sides of the network effect are playing a valuable part in expanding the value of the overall system. But the fourth is particularly important. I mean, all over Silicon Valley and really around the world, many thousands of programmers are using Bitcoin as a building block for a wide range of new products and services that were not possible before the solving of the Byzantine generals' problem. For this reason alone, the challengers to Bitcoin face an uphill battle. I mean, there are thousands of other digital assets that are hoping to be the next Bitcoin. But if something's to displace Bitcoin now, it will have to have a sizable improvement and will have to happen real quickly. Otherwise, the network effect that has carried Bitcoin from an esoteric chat room to a global phenomenon will carry Bitcoin to global digital cash dominance. So there's a few benefits about using the Bitcoin network to make your monetary transactions versus what we've become used to. Our banks, cash, so on and so forth. So, benefit number one, it's democratic. Unlike paper money, where a single central authority, like a bank, manages a record of all transactions, Bitcoin is minted, mined, circulated, and audited by all of its users. Next, it's harder to manipulate. Government agencies can't intercede in the network by doing things like increasing the volume, buying massive amounts of a portion of it, fiddling with the interest rates, or plucking the yield curves. Next, it's global. Someone in Tennessee can instantaneously trade Bitcoin with somebody across the globe in Tokyo at a low cost. It's censorship resistant. The rules of the Bitcoin network, or we can think of it as the Bitcoin monetary policy, are governed by a decentralized peer-to-peer network involving a disparate and global user base of consumers, investors, companies, developers, miners, and speculators. It is impractical, if not impossible, for a single actor to unilaterally influence the rules of the system, so this affords Bitcoin holders a special kind of confidence that Bitcoin cannot be devalued by arbitrary monetary policy decisions, and that they will always be able to hold and transfer their Bitcoin freely. This could be valuable not just for individuals and companies, but also to governments whose foreign currency reserves may be subject to the whims of foreign entities, tariffs, trade wars. I think you get the point. One of the most significant sources of early demands for Bitcoin was their use in illicit drug trade. Since then, there's been this narrative that Bitcoin is used for black market trade. Bitcoin, however, is far from an anonymous currency, and every transaction transmitted on the Bitcoin network is forever recorded on a public blockchain. So the historical records of transactions allow for later forensic analysis to identify the source and flow of funds. The IRS is watching Bitcoin transactions. So if you want to buy those drugs using your Bitcoin, if you want to purchase that hit using your Bitcoin, you'd be a lot safer just using cash like the good old days. So it's such analysis of the forensics, the digital quote-unquote paper trail of the transactions that led to the apprehending of the perpetrator of the infamous Mt. Gox heist. More on that in the show notes below. So, while it is true that a sufficiently careful and diligent person can probably conceal their identity when using Bitcoin, this is not why Bitcoin was so popular for trading drugs. The key attribute that made Bitcoin valuable for illicit activities is that Bitcoin is permissionless at the network level. When Bitcoins are sent on the network, there is no human intervention deciding whether the transaction should or shouldn't be allowed. No Western Union to take a cut of that remittance. No Wells Fargo to flag your account for interacting with an unverifiable seller. As a distributed peer-to-peer network, Bitcoin is, by its very nature, designed to be censorship resistant. This is in stark contrast to the fiat banking system, where states regulate banks and other gatekeepers of monetary transmission to report and prevent outlawed uses of monetary goods. The next major benefit is that there's a finite supply. As dictated by Bitcoin's creator, there can only ever be 21 million total coins in circulation, and the final Bitcoin will be mined in 2140, and every 4 years the coin gets harder and harder to mine. Whereas in fiat-based monetary systems, what we're witnessing right now in this moment, March 2021, is there's actually an infinite supply. Need more money? Print more money. Thanks, feds. Next, Bitcoins must be mined. The only way to release new Bitcoins into circulation is through the efforts of digital excavators, these miners we spoke of in previous lessons. These miners are rewarded through their work processing payments and verifying transactions across the network. Everything we've spoken of thus far are the benefits of Bitcoin. But Bitcoin was created for some specific early use cases, and right now, at this moment in March 2021, we're seeing a slew of additional innovations growing on top of the Bitcoin network. But let's focus on some of the early applications of Bitcoins. One immediately obvious and enormous area for Bitcoin-based innovation is remittance. Every day, hundreds of millions of people go to work in grueling jobs in foreign countries to make money to send back to their families in their home countries. It's estimated that over 400 billion in total dollars, US dollars, annually are transmitted from these remittance payments. Every day, banks and payment companies extract mind-boggling fees up to 10% and sometimes even higher for immigrants, new arrivals, and displaced people to send their money to their loved ones in need in their homeland. Use case number 2. Bitcoin can generally be a powerful force for bringing a much larger number of people around the world into the modern economic system. Only 20 countries around the world have what we might consider to be a fully modern banking and payment system. The other roughly 175, well, they've got a long ways to go. As a result, many people in many countries are excluded from products and services that we in the West take for granted. Even Netflix, a completely virtual service, is only available to about 40 countries. Bitcoin as a global payment system anyone can use from anywhere at any time can be a powerful catalyst to extend the benefits of the market economy to virtually everyone on the planet in Wi-Fi range. Here in the United States, there's a long recognized problem of the extremely high fees that unbanked, people without conventional bank accounts, pay for basic financial services. Bitcoin can be used to go straight to that problem by making it easy to offer extremely low fee services to people outside the traditional financial system, or people who don't qualify for loans, or people whose credit scores are so bad they don't get the same perks, or for people who live far away from ATMs. A third fascinating use case for Bitcoin is micropayments, or ultra-small payments. Micropayments have never really been feasible, and there's been decades of attempts. And the reason why these small payments haven't been feasible is because they're not cost-effective for the current monetary infrastructure to run small payments. Think $1 and below. It's why you can't pay for that coffee that's under $2.50 with your credit card, because the fees that Visa charges your favorite coffee shop doesn't make it feasible. With Bitcoin, we can make fractions of a penny, donations, transactions, and this is important because imagine you watching your favorite YouTube channel. You can toss them a fraction of a penny, or you could get paid a fraction of a penny to view an ad that pops up. So this means instead of being the product of services like Facebook and Google, users can become stakeholders and beneficiaries of the ecosystem by the fluid transmission of value that we're generating for these large entities. But Bitcoin isn't all benefits and value, fun, and games. There's some serious risks involved. The first risk is that Bitcoin doesn't achieve its network effect. Bitcoin's gained credibility with early adopters and some large institutions, but it still remains niche and relative to incumbent monetary assets like gold. There's a risk that Bitcoin never achieves the broad acceptance that its proponents hope it will. And of course, therein also lies the opportunity, for if Bitcoin were already a broadly accepted store of value, then it would likely be worth orders of magnitude more with relatively little remaining upside. Next, Bitcoin's pretty volatile. Bitcoin has been and continues to be quite volatile relative to US dollars, so there's a risk that this volatility limits adoption or prevents investors from considering Bitcoin as a credible store of value. For better or worse, this volatility may be inherent to the process of Bitcoin adoption, as natural swings in investor confidence are reflected in Bitcoin's price day to day, hour to hour, 24/7, and even on the weekends. Bitcoin's bubble-like adoption process exacerbates this effect. As Bitcoin matures and becomes more broadly accepted as a monetary asset, investor confidence and Bitcoin price should hopefully stabilize. Next, regulation. Bitcoin is a new currency and payment rail that sits outside of existing government controls, posing a potential threat to existing regulatory frameworks and monetary systems. Similar to early internet regulation, there's hope that governments pursue nuanced regulation that allows innovative use cases to prevail. However, there's risk that regulation is onerous and ultimately hinders broader Bitcoin adoption. One thing that helps mitigate this is that Bitcoin's global decentralized network, like the internet, which is difficult to control for any single government. And while governments can plausibly limit access to Bitcoin in various ways, it's going to be hard to shut the whole thing down. Next, there's the technological risk. The Bitcoin codebase and network have been battle-tested for over a decade, but it continues to evolve, and there remain some open questions about how the system might behave in the long run. For example, when Bitcoin supply approaches its apex and miners must be compensated primarily with transaction fees rather than block rewards, what's going to happen? Is the incentive still there for the miners to maintain the network? For those nodes to remain active and on, running up their electricity bills? We won't know until we get there. Next, the competitive risk. There are thousands of other cryptocurrencies that could compete with Bitcoin, as could digital fiat currencies sponsored by government. Relative to other cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin has a strong first mover advantage in acceptance, security, and credibility that's going to be difficult for competitors to overcome. Relative to digital fiat currencies, Bitcoin remains differentiated in that it's scarce, gold-like nature. Digital US dollars or digital yen would still be subject to local monetary policy decisions, although they have the benefit that they are currently units people are already familiar with. The final risk is the risk that I perceive as the greatest, and it's the unknown unknowns. We need to acknowledge that a digital monetary asset such as Bitcoin has never existed before. We're in uncharted territories with even more uncertainty that is typical. We're in an era of black swans. Some potential unknown risks might include quantum computing that enables the mining rigs to gamify what they do and secure more Bitcoins, or to hack the network. Another risk is an EMF attack, or the power grid goes down and we're unable to access our digital lives, the Wi-Fi, the phone, the lights, it all goes off. While some of these risks might seem far-flung, they need to be acknowledged if we're to honestly discuss the risks involved with this emerging asset. So these are some of the risks and benefits of Bitcoin. But don't take my word for it. Let's turn to the experts.
Bitcoin is one of a myriad of technologies that's being developed right now and implemented that is about to reshape our entire monetary system. Reshaping money might just be the final inversion of the day. We live in a world currently where the largest hotelier, Airbnb, doesn't own a single hotel room. Where the largest taxi companies don't own a single taxi. Where the largest retailer owns no products. And where revolutions are sparked by 140 characters and fanned by millions of supporters, all on a cloud. The idea of fiat currency, like the US dollar or the yen, being untethered from gold seemed unimaginable a few decades ago. So is it really that crazy to think that our monetary system might undergo another dramatic change that seems unfathomable in the current moment? I encourage you to keep learning and exploring this space. There's a myriad of ways where you can be benefiting individually, professionally, and supporting a more healthy, resilient community.